My cousin crashed my car, then tried to destroy my life by suing me. He never expected the dash cam to expose everything. My name is Claire Bennett, and I'm 29 years old. Until 18 months ago, I believed the worst mistake you could make with family was refusing to help. I know now that I was wrong. People often ask how I ended up spending nearly 2 years fighting my own cousin in court over a car. The truth is, it all started with a single favor. If I'd said no that afternoon, I would have kept my car, my savings, and probably most of my family. Instead, I learned how dangerous blind loyalty can be. I've always been the dependable one. Whenever someone needed help moving, a ride to the airport, a short-term loan, or even someone to watch their dog, I was the first person they called. People liked calling me reliable, but what they really meant was that I was the one expected to sacrifice whenever someone else had a problem. My cousin Ethan Carter was my complete opposite. Our mothers are sisters, so we practically grew up together, spending nearly every summer, Thanksgiving and Christmas under the same roof. We were close as kids, but adulthood sent us in very different directions. I became cautious, while Ethan developed the kind of confidence that made him believe consequences were always someone else's problem. People loved him. Teachers, neighbors, relatives. Everyone seemed ready with another excuse whenever he messed up. He didn't mean it. He's under a lot of pressure. Give him another chance. After a while, no one expected Ethan to change. They simply expected everyone else to forgive him, and I rarely argue because it felt easier than fighting the entire family. Looking back, that may have been my biggest mistake. 3 months before everything fell apart, Ethan called on a Thursday evening. "Hey, Claire, what's up? My car's in the shop. What happened?" "Transmission," he sighed. "They say it'll take at least a week." "That sucks." "It does." After a brief silence, he finally asked, "Can I borrow your Accord this weekend?" I glanced out my apartment window at my silver 2019 Honda Accord parked below. Just looking at it made me hesitate. Daniel always joked that I treated my service folder like a family photo album, and maybe he was right. "I don't know," I admitted. "It's only for 2 days," Ethan said quickly. "Olivia's expecting me and I haven't seen her in weeks. I'll bring it back Sunday afternoon, fill the tank, and take good care of it. I promise." Before I could answer, another call came in. Aunt Linda. The moment I picked up, she got straight to the point. "Claire, Ethan said you're thinking about saying no." "I haven't decided. He really needs the car. You won't even be using it this weekend." I hesitated. "It's an expensive car." "He'll be careful," she replied, without missing a beat. "Family helps family, and you know Ethan would do the same for you." I wasn't convinced, but hearing those words made saying no feel selfish. After we hung up, Daniel walked into the kitchen carrying 2 mugs of coffee. One look at my face told him something was wrong. "Ethan wants to borrow my car." "For the weekend?" I nodded. He sat across from me and studied me for a moment before asking, "If you're this uncomfortable, why are you even considering it?" "Because everyone keeps telling me family should help." Daniel stirred his coffee before looking back at me. "I'm not telling you what to do, but answer me honestly. If something goes wrong, do you really believe Ethan will take responsibility?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Daniel gave a small nod. "That's all the answer you need." Before either of us spoke again, my phone rang. "Mom, I just talked to Linda," she said. "It would mean a lot if you could help Ethan." "Mom, he's family." Those 2 words again, as if they erased every hesitation, every risk, and every instinct telling me this was a bad idea. After the call ended, I looked at Daniel. "I think I've already lost this argument." He offered a sympathetic smile. "Then make sure you're saying yes because it's your choice, not because everyone else expects you to." The next morning, Ethan showed up at my apartment, wearing the same easy smile he'd used to charm his way out of trouble his entire life. "You're saving me." "I'm lending you my car," I corrected as I handed him the keys. "There's a difference." He laughed. "I know." I held onto the keys for one last second. "Just promise me you'll drive carefully. This car means a lot to me." "Relax," he said with a grin. "I'm a great driver." I watched him pull away, unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had followed me since he'd first asked to borrow the car. I couldn't explain it then, but somewhere deep down, something kept telling me I was making a mistake. The rest of Saturday passed quietly. Daniel and I spent the afternoon grocery shopping before ordering takeout that evening. Around 7:30, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but after a brief hesitation, I answered. "Hello? Claire." It was Ethan. The strain in his voice made my stomach tighten. "I'm at County General." "What happened?" "I crashed the car." Everything around me seemed to stop. I shot to my feet so quickly my chair tipped over behind me. "Are you okay?" "I've got 2 broken wrists, a concussion, and a lot of bruises, but I'm alive." I closed my eyes in relief. "Thank God. What happened?" There was a long pause before he answered. The brakes failed. The explanation felt wrong the moment I heard it. My Accord had passed a full inspection only 3 weeks earlier, including a complete brake check. Claire? He asked. You still there? I'm here, I replied quietly. We'll figure it out. After I hung up, Daniel studied my face. You don't believe him? I shook my head. The inspection. Partly. He waited. What else? Instead of answering, I looked toward my laptop. A small notification light was blinking. 2 years earlier, after a minor accident turned into an argument over who was at fault, I'd installed a dual-facing dash camera with GPS audio recording and automatic cloud backup. Every trip was saved as soon as the engine shut off. Without saying a word, I opened the app and selected the newest recording. The highway appeared on the screen as music played through the speakers. Seconds later, the GPS overlay flashed across the corner. Daniel leaned closer. Neither of us spoke as the interior camera showed Ethan repeatedly glancing down at his phone while traffic ahead slowed. By the time he looked up, it was already too late. He slammed on the brakes and the front of my Accord dipped exactly as it should have. The braking system worked, but at 87 miles per hour there wasn't enough distance left to stop. Ethan jerked the wheel, the tires screamed, and the car spun into the guardrail. The recording ended in silence. Daniel was the first to speak. The brakes worked. I nodded slowly. They worked perfectly. Before closing the app, I saved multiple copies of the footage to the cloud, an external drive, and another encrypted backup. Something told me that recording was about to become far more valuable than the car itself. At the time, I thought losing my Accord was the worst part of the nightmare. I was wrong. 3 days later, the insurance company called. Daniel and I were sitting at the kitchen table when my phone rang again. I glanced at the unfamiliar number before answering. Is this Claire Bennett? Yes. My name is Melissa Grant. I'm the adjuster assigned to the accident involving your 2019 Honda Accord. Daniel looked up from his coffee as I switched the call to speaker. Melissa confirmed that Ethan had been listed as an authorized driver because I'd given him permission to borrow my car. She asked when it had last been serviced, whether I'd noticed any mechanical problems, and if anyone had ever warned me about the brakes. No, I replied. The car passed a full inspection 3 weeks before the crash. A brief silence followed. Your cousin has given us a different account. My grip tightened around the phone. What account? He claims the brakes had been acting strangely before the accident and suggests you either knew or should have known the vehicle wasn't safe. The room suddenly felt unnaturally quiet. He said I knew. That's part of his statement. Daniel immediately mouthed, don't say anything else. I forced myself to stay calm. That's false. I have every maintenance record. We'll need copies. Until the investigation is complete, we can't determine liability. What exactly is he claiming? Medical expenses, lost wages, and additional compensation for pain and suffering. So far, the medical bills alone total around $12,000. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. Ethan had crashed my car while speeding and texting, and now he was trying to convince the insurance company I'd knowingly handed him a dangerous vehicle. After the call ended, Daniel pushed his coffee aside. You need a lawyer. I have the footage, and he already accused you in writing. This is bigger than showing everyone a video. How was right? That afternoon, I called Rachel Morgan, an attorney my family had known for years. The next morning, I walked into her office carrying everything I had: maintenance records, insurance documents, Ethan's messages asking to borrow the car, the hospital voicemail, and the complete dash camera footage. Rachel watched the recording twice without interrupting. The second time, she paused when Ethan looked down at his phone. Then again when the GPS showed patting Devon MPA. And finally at the moment he hit the brakes before losing control. She leaned back. The footage clearly shows the brakes responding. An accident reconstruction expert will confirm it, but this alone seriously damages his story. She flipped through the inspection report. This isn't just someone refusing to admit a mistake. He's building a negligence claim against you. I was only trying to help him. Rachel looked at me sympathetically. And he'll use that against you if he thinks it protects him. The words hurt because I knew she was right. She told me not to contact Ethan, preserve every message and voicemail, and keep multiple copies of the footage. I already have. Good. And don't let anyone tell you this is just a family disagreement. The moment he accused you of knowingly lending him an unsafe car, it became a legal case. 2 weeks later, a process server knocked on my apartment door. You've been served. I stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the envelope until Daniel came home. Ethan was suing me for $45,000. According to the complaint, I'd knowingly allowed him to drive a dangerous vehicle, failed to disclose brake problems, and caused his injuries through negligent maintenance. He was demanding compensation for medical bills, lost wages, emotional distress, and pain and suffering. One sentence claimed I'd personally assured him the car was completely safe, despite knowing the brakes were defective. I read it again, hardly believing someone I'd grown up with could invent something so outrageous. He made all of this up, I whispered. Daniel sat beside me. He's hoping you'll settle because you're scared. Before I could answer, Aunt Linda called. Claire, I know you're upset. Upset? Ethan sued me. He's in pain. He hasn't been sleeping, and the medical bills are overwhelming him. He crashed my car. The brakes failed. No, they didn't. You weren't there. I looked down at the lawsuit. I have a dash camera. Silence. It recorded everything. Ethan was driving 87 miles an hour, texting, and the brakes worked exactly as they should. Linda didn't say another word before hanging up. 20 minutes later, Ethan called. I let it go to voicemail. Claire, we need to talk. Mom said you have some video. Maybe we can work this out privately. I listened twice. He never apologized. He never admitted lying. He only cared that I had proof. The next morning, Mom showed up looking exhausted. Your aunt thinks this is going to ruin Ethan. He accused me of knowingly giving him a dangerous car. Maybe you could settle, pay something so the family can move on. I stared at her. You want me to pay the man who destroyed my car? I want this family to survive. Why is that my responsibility? Because you're the reasonable one. There it was again, the same reason I'd lent him the car in the first place. Everyone expected me to carry the consequences because I was the one who always kept the peace. Family is more important than money, Mom said quietly. Then why did Ethan sue me for $45,000? She couldn't answer. Rachel filed our response that week, denying every allegation and submitting the maintenance records, dash camera footage, GPS data, and phone evidence. We also filed a counterclaim seeking the value of my totaled car and the legal costs his actions had caused. During discovery, Ethan's attorney requested the unedited footage. Rachel sent it. 2 days later, she called. Ethan's lawyer withdrew. Why? He watched the video. He advised Ethan to dismiss the case and warned him there could be insurance fraud issues. So it's over? No. Something in her voice made my stomach sink. Ethan refused. He's looking for another lawyer. I stared at the empty parking space where my Accord used to sit. The evidence had destroyed his story, and even his own attorney had told him to stop. I chose to keep going anyway. That's when I realized this was no longer about medical bills or a wrecked car. Ethan needed his lie to become the truth, even if destroying my life was the price. Rachel had barely finished speaking when the insurance company called again. Our investigation is complete. I put the call on the speaker. The adjuster confirmed that the maintenance records, dash camera footage, accident reconstruction, and Ethan's driving history all pointed to the same conclusion. There is no evidence of brake failure. Your vehicle was properly maintained, and the collision was caused by excessive speed and distracted driving. Finally, someone outside my own lawyer had confirmed what I'd known from the moment I watched the video. I was right. 3 nights later, someone started pounding on my apartment door just after 10. The blows rattled the walls hard enough for Daniel to glance through the peephole. It's Ethan. Neither of us moved. Claire, he shouted. Open the door. I know you're home. You don't have to answer, Daniel said. I know. But I also knew Ethan wouldn't stop until security showed up. I unlocked the deadbolt, but left the security chain in place. The door opened only a few inches. Ethan looked exhausted. Both wrists were still wrapped, dark circles framed his eyes, and whatever sympathy I might have felt disappeared the moment he spoke. You need to call your insurance company. I can't. Yes, you can. They're coming after me because of you. They're coming after you because you totaled my car. The brakes failed. Even after the investigation and the dashcam footage, he was still clinging to the same lie. I watched the video, I said. So? You were texting. I wasn't. You were driving 87 miles an hour. The speedometer was wrong. The camera uses GPS. You edited it. For a moment, I honestly wondered if he'd convinced himself his own story was true. You've always been jealous, he snapped. You hated that everyone liked me better. That's enough, Daniel warned, stepping forward. Ethan ignored him. You're ruining my life over a stupid car. No, I replied evenly. You ruined your own life the moment you decided to lie. You forced me into this. I forced you to sue me? You gave me no choice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You crashed my car. You're supposed to help family. I already did. Helping doesn't mean paying for your mistakes. His face tightened. You're dead to me. Then leave. You'll regret this. I already regret lending you my car. Furious, Ethan kicked the doorframe before storming toward the elevators. Daniel immediately photographed the fresh dent, chipped paint, and splintered wood, while our hallway security camera captured the entire confrontation. Rachel called after reviewing the photos. So now he's damaging property. Yes. Good. I frowned. Good. Every outburst makes him less credible. Over the following weeks, the lawsuit split the family in two. Aunt Linda stopped speaking to my mother, holidays had to be divided, and my grandmother couldn't understand why everyone suddenly refused to be in the same room. She still believed every family problem could be solved over dinner. Mom tried to stay neutral. Your aunt cries every day, she told me over homemade soup. I believe her. She thinks Ethan has suffered enough. He still hasn't accepted responsibility. She sighed. I just miss my sister. I miss her too. Neither of us had anything else to say. Meanwhile, Ethan's new attorney asked the court to dismiss my counterclaim, arguing that because I'd willingly lent Ethan the car, I couldn't recover damages. Rachel almost smiled when she explained it. Permission to borrow a car isn't permission to drive recklessly. A week later, the judge agreed and denied the motion within minutes. For the first time since the crash, it felt like the evidence was finally carrying more weight than Ethan's excuses. A few days later, Rachel called again. I've subpoenaed his phone records. Will they help? They'll show exactly what he was doing before impact. I looked out at the empty parking space where my Accord used to be. Soon Ethan would have to answer under oath, not in front of relatives willing to excuse him, but in front of lawyers, a court reporter, and evidence that couldn't be argued away. The deposition was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Before we entered the conference room, Rachel gave me one last reminder. You have the truth. Don't try to improve it. For the first time in weeks, I felt calm. Through the glass wall, I watched Ethan arrive with his second attorney. He still carried himself with quiet confidence, smiling at people in the hallway as if this were another problem he could charm his way through. The smile disappeared the moment he saw me. Rachel and I watched his deposition from the adjoining room. His attorney began with easy questions. Mr. Carter, can you describe what happened? I was driving normally when the brakes started feeling strange. Rachel quietly slid a legal pad toward me. Let him talk. Ethan claimed the brakes had been acting up for several minutes before the crash and barely responded when he tried to stop. Only after his attorney finished did Rachel stand. Mr. Carter, let's talk about your speed. I don't remember. She displayed the dash cam footage on the monitor. The GPS overlay showed 87 mph. Is that your vehicle? Yes. And you were driving? Yes. The GPS recorded your speed at 87 miles an hour. I don't know if that's accurate. It comes from satellite data, not your speedometer. Silence filled the room. So were you traveling around 87 miles per hour? I suppose it's possible. Rachel advanced the footage. The interior camera showed Ethan repeatedly looking down at his phone before the collision. What are you doing here? Checking directions. She calmly opened another folder. We subpoenaed your phone records. They showed text messages sent at 3:45 and 3:46 p.m. The crash happened about 2 minutes later. She looked directly at him. So were you checking directions or sending text messages? I don't remember. The room fell silent. After several long seconds, Ethan turned to his attorney. I'd like a break. Once everyone stepped outside, Rachel quietly closed her folder. He's already falling apart. When the deposition resumed, Ethan was noticeably less confident. Rachel returned to the brake issue, asking him to explain what he meant by abnormal. His answers grew increasingly vague until she placed the post-accident inspection report in front of him. The inspection found brake pads with plenty of usable life, clean brake fluid, normal rotor wear, and no evidence of hydraulic failure or damaged brake lines. Can you explain why every expert concluded the braking system worked properly? Ethan shifted uneasily. Maybe they missed something. Rachel held his gaze. So your testimony is that every trained expert who examined the car was wrong, and only you were right. Ethan stared at the table. I guess. Rachel didn't press further. She simply let the answer sit in the transcript, knowing it carried more weight than any argument she could make. My deposition that afternoon was far simpler. Rachel walked me through the facts one step at a time. Did you give Mr. Carter permission to use your vehicle? Yes. Did you tell him to drive carefully? Yes. Were you aware of any brake problems? No, because there weren't any. She introduced my maintenance records, repair history, and inspection reports before moving to the dash cam. I explained that I'd installed it after an earlier accident, turned into a dispute over conflicting stories, and that every recording was automatically backed up to the cloud. I never imagined it would become the most important evidence I'd ever own. Ethan's attorney tried to suggest the brakes could have failed temporarily before working again, but Rachel objected immediately. The judge agreed the question had no factual basis. He changed tactics. You cared a great deal about this car, didn't you? I did. So you're emotionally invested in blaming my client. I met his eyes. I'm emotionally invested in telling the truth. Rachel smiled faintly. That answer spoke for itself. A week later, she called me into her office. "They want to settle, Ethan?" She nodded and handed me the proposal. I would dismiss his lawsuit if I dropped my counterclaim and stopped cooperating with the insurance company's reimbursement case. I couldn't believe it. After everything, he expects me to save him? My answer was no, Rachel said. "I assumed you'd agree." "I do." She became serious. "There's something else." After reviewing Ethan's testimony against the investigation, she'd concluded the inconsistencies were serious enough to notify the district attorney's office. I referred the file for possible insurance fraud. My heart skipped. Will they prosecute him? I honestly don't know. Cases like this aren't always a priority, but he knows the referral has been made. For the first time, I wondered if Ethan finally understood how serious this had become. Unfortunately, fear didn't make him honest. It only made him more desperate. A few days later, my grandmother called. "I've been hearing terrible things," she said softly. "Your aunt says you're trying to send Ethan to prison." "I'm not, Grandma. I made a mistake." "He made a series of choices," I replied gently. "He borrowed my car, drove nearly 90 miles an hour, texted behind the wheel, blamed imaginary brake problems, and then sued me." She fell quiet. "I just want this family together again." "So do I." "Then forgive him." For a moment, I almost gave in. I pictured holidays, birthdays, and everything this lawsuit had already taken from us. Then I remembered the $45,000 complaint, the lies, the dent in my apartment door, and months of living under accusations I didn't deserve. "I tried to solve this peacefully," I said. "He chose court." After we hung up, I cried for the first time since the lawsuit began. Not because I regretted fighting back, but because I finally accepted there was no ending where everyone walked away happy. An hour later, Daniel found me on the balcony. "You okay?" "No." "But are you still doing the right thing?" I nodded. "Yes." "Then don't confuse doing the right thing with doing the easy thing." The following Friday, Rachel sent a brief email. Trial date confirmed. Months of lies, pressure, manipulation, and family conflict were about to be tested in one courtroom. This time Ethan wouldn't be arguing with me. He'd be arguing with the evidence. The trial began on a rainy Thursday morning. Daniel squeezed my hand before we entered the courthouse. "You've already survived the hardest part." I wanted to believe him. Across the hallway, Ethan stood beside his attorney. Months earlier, I would have walked over to ask how he was doing. Now we were waiting for a judge to decide which one of us was telling the truth. Because both sides had agreed to a bench trial, there would be no jury, only a judge weighing the evidence. Before opening statements, Rachel leaned toward me. "Don't watch Ethan, watch the judge. That's the only opinion that matters." She opened our case with a simple statement. "This case is not about mechanical failure. It's about personal responsibility." She briefly walked through the timeline. I loaned Ethan a properly maintained car. He sped, texted, while driving, crashed it, and then blamed me instead of accepting responsibility. There was no exaggeration, only documented facts. Ethan's attorney argued that an intermittent brake failure could have caused the crash and disappeared before investigators examined the vehicle. But for the first time since this nightmare began, that explanation sounded far less convincing than the evidence waiting to challenge it. Even before the evidence was presented, I noticed the judge barely took notes during Ethan's opening statement. He simply listened, expression unreadable. Rachel called the accident reconstruction expert first, using photographs, vehicle data, and diagrams. He explained exactly how the investigation had been conducted before delivering the conclusion that mattered most. There is no physical evidence of brake failure. He testified that the brake pads still had plenty of usable life, the brake fluid was clean, the rotors showed only normal wear, and every critical component functioned as designed. The dashcam confirmed the same thing. As the footage played, everyone watched the Accord slow before impact. The braking system responded normally, the expert said. The vehicle simply didn't have enough stopping distance because of its speed. During cross-examination, Ethan's attorney suggested the brakes might have failed temporarily. "Anything is theoretically possible," the expert replied calmly. "But engineering conclusions require evidence, and I found none supporting that theory." That answer ended the discussion. Rachel then played the complete dash camera recording. The courtroom watched traffic begin slowing as the GPS overlay displayed 87 mph at Katat. The interior camera showed Ethan repeatedly glancing at his phone before finally looking up and slamming on the brakes. The Accord slowed, then veered into the guardrail. No one spoke. Next came Ethan's phone records. A representative from his wireless carrier confirmed 2 text messages had been sent at 1:45 p.m. and 1:46 p.m., only minutes before the crash. The timeline matched the video perfectly. Rachel rested her case. When Ethan took the stand, he looked nothing like the confident man I'd watched walk into the courthouse that morning. His attorney led him through a series of gentle questions. Did you intentionally crash Claire's car? Of course not. Did you believe the brakes were malfunctioning? Yes. Were you trying to deceive anyone? No. He almost sounded believable until Rachel stood. She carried a single folder. Mr. Carter, when did you first notice the brakes felt abnormal? A few minutes before the crash. Did you call Claire? No. Send her a text warning her? No. Pull over? No. So you believed the car was unsafe, yet you kept driving? I thought I could make it. Rachel pressed a button, and the GPS reading filled the monitor. 87 miles per hour. Ethan shifted in his chair. I didn't realize. Were you texting? I was checking something. The phone records show text messages. I sent a couple. While driving? Yes. The courtroom fell silent. Rachel let the admission settle before asking one final question. If you truly believed the brakes were failing, why were you comfortable taking your eyes off the road to send text messages? Ethan opened his mouth, looked toward his attorney, then quietly answered. I don't know. Rachel stepped back. No further questions. She didn't need another one. I testified shortly afterward. Rachel kept my testimony focused on the facts. I had hesitated before lending Ethan the car. Daniel had warned me against it, and both my mother and Aunt Linda had insisted family should help family. She asked whether I'd ever experienced brake problems. No. Would you have loaned Ethan the car if you believed it was unsafe? Absolutely not. She introduced my maintenance records, inspection reports, and repair history before turning the questioning over to Ethan's attorney. Ms. Bennett, do you love your cousin? The question caught me off guard. I did. So this lawsuit isn't personal? I met his eyes. It became personal when he accused me of knowingly putting his life in danger. I glanced at his notes, then quietly said, no further questions. Closing arguments lasted less than an hour. Rachel reminded the court that every piece of evidence pointed to the same conclusion. The maintenance records, accident reconstruction, GPS data, phone records, dash camera footage, and even Ethan's own testimony all proved there had been no brake failure. The crash was caused by excessive speed and distracted driving. Ethan's attorney made one final attempt, arguing that no one could know exactly what happened inside the braking system during those final seconds. Rachel rose calmly. We do know because those final seconds were recorded. This court isn't choosing between two opinions, it's choosing between documented facts and a story that changed every time new evidence appeared. The judge thanked both attorneys, closed his notebook, and announced that he would issue his ruling the following morning. Outside the courtroom, there were no reporters or dramatic speeches, only families quietly leaving the building. As Daniel and I reached the parking lot, I finally let out a breath I'd been holding for months. You okay? I don't know. You told the truth. I know. And tomorrow? I looked back at the courthouse. Tomorrow wasn't about proving what happened anymore. That part was over. Tomorrow was about whether the truth would finally have consequences. The courtroom was even quieter the next morning. Daniel sat beside me while Ethan stared silently at the defense table, looking exhausted instead of confident. His mother clutched a tissue behind him, while my own mother offered me a nervous smile from across the room. Whatever happened next, I hoped she wouldn't have to keep choosing between us. The judge took his seat. I have reviewed the testimony, documentary evidence, expert reports, and the parties' arguments. The court is prepared to rule. I realized I'd stopped breathing. He addressed Ethan's lawsuit first. The evidence does not support Mr. Carter's claim that Ms. Bennett knowingly provided an unsafe vehicle. He summarized the findings. The recent inspection, the accident reconstruction, the dash camera, GPS data, and phone records all pointed to one conclusion. The accident resulted from Mr. Carter's own negligent operation of the vehicle. Then came the words I'd waited months to hear. Mr. Carter's complaint is dismissed with prejudice. Relief washed over me. The judge then turned to my counterclaim. Although Ethan had permission to borrow the car, that permission didn't excuse reckless driving. The court found him responsible for destroying my vehicle and awarded me $18,500 for its value, plus $7,200 in attorney's fees. The court also finds Mr. Carter's testimony lacked credibility and was repeatedly contradicted by objective evidence. In that moment, excuses, sympathy, and family loyalty no longer mattered. Only the facts did. The hearing ended less than 5 minutes later. Outside the courtroom, Ethan caught up with us. So that's it? He asked bitterly. You've won. I didn't come here to win, I replied. I came because you sued me. You could have dropped the counterclaim. You could have told the truth. His expression hardened. You've ruined everything. I shook my head. No, you did that the day you blamed me for your own choices. Daniel gently touched my arm. We should go. This time, I walked away without looking back. The legal battle wasn't quite over. A month later, Rachel told me the insurance company had won its reimbursement case against Ethan, requiring him to repay the money it had paid for my totaled car. She also confirmed the district attorney had reviewed the fraud referral, but declined to file criminal charges because of limited resources. Still, Ethan received a formal warning, and the incident would remain part of his insurance history. The consequences came quickly. His insurance premiums nearly doubled. He eventually sold his car because he couldn't afford it, and the civil judgment damaged his credit. He began making small monthly payments toward what he owed, knowing it would take years to repay. The family never fully recovered. Holidays were split between two houses, birthdays became awkward, and Aunt Linda never forgave me. She insisted I destroyed her son's future until one afternoon my mother quietly admitted she'd finally understood the truth. Ethan wasn't asking for forgiveness, she said. He wanted you to accept responsibility for something you never did. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. That was all either of us needed to say. Grandma eventually stopped asking me to settle. She never understood every legal detail, but she understood one simple fact. I had been the one who was sued. 2 months after the trial, Ethan sent one final message. I know you got what you wanted. Hope you're happy. You destroyed my life over a car. I stared at the screen before replying. I didn't destroy your life. You chose to speed. You chose to text while driving. You chose to lie about the brakes. You chose to sue me. Every consequence you're facing began with those choices, not mine. I pressed send. He never replied. A few weeks later, Daniel came with me to buy another car. I chose a certified pre-owned 2022 Honda Civic instead of another Accord. As I signed the paperwork, he smiled. Feels good? It feels like starting over. Before I even drove it home, I scheduled another dash camera installation. Daniel laughed. I had a feeling you'd do that. It'll be the best money I ever spend. As we pulled onto the highway, sunlight finally broke through the clouds. For the first time in 18 months, I wasn't thinking about court dates, insurance claims, or depositions. I was simply enjoying the drive. People sometimes ask if I regret lending Ethan my car. Honestly, I don't. If I'd refused, I probably would have spent the rest of my life believing he was just careless. Instead, I learned who he became when his own choices caught up with him. Rather than accept responsibility, he lied, blamed someone else, and expected family loyalty to succeed where the truth couldn't. The 25-7 judgment looked significant on paper, and I may never recover every dollar, but that stopped mattering long ago. The real victory wasn't replacing my car. It was refusing to carry the burden of someone else's deception. Ethan thought family pressure would make me give in. He assumed I'd rather pay for his mistakes than disappoint everyone. Worst of all, he believed evidence could be explained away just like every excuse he'd relied on before. I was wrong. As the miles disappeared beneath my new car, the dash camera quietly recorded another ordinary drive. This time it wasn't there because I expected the worst. Every time I start the engine now, that little camera reminds me of something simple. Memories can be questioned, but evidence can't.